The moment Marcus Thompson knelt beside the luxury sedan on that cold November evening, he had no idea that the woman crying inside would be dead within 72 hours, and that he would be blamed for her murder. His calloused hands, weathered from years of working odd jobs just to survive, trembled as he approached the vehicle, not from the biting wind that cut through his threadbare flannel shirt, but from the overwhelming sense that his life was about to change in ways he could never imagine. The 34-year-old man with warm brown skin and kind eyes that had seen too much hardship paused at the driver's window, where a woman in an expensive navy blue business suit sat with her head in her hands, her shoulders shaking with sobs that seemed to carry the weight of the entire world. Victoria Sterling looked up at the stranger through tear-filled green eyes, and in that single moment, two completely different worlds collided on a desolate stretch of highway in rural Tennessee. She was 32 years old, with fair skin, auburn hair pulled back in an elegant twist, and pearl earrings that probably cost more than Marcus earned in an entire year. Her luxury sedan, now sitting helplessly with two flat tires on the passenger side, represented everything Marcus had never had and everything Victoria was terrified of losing. What neither of them knew was that someone was watching from the shadows of the nearby woods, someone who had orchestrated this entire encounter, someone who had plans for both of them that would test the very limits of human faith, love, and sacrifice. The question that would haunt them both in the days to come was simple yet devastating: was their meeting truly an accident, or had fate, or something far more sinister, brought them together for a purpose neither could comprehend? Marcus cleared his throat gently, not wanting to startle the distressed woman. "Ma'am, I couldn't help but notice you're having some trouble. Mind if I take a look?" His voice was soft, carrying the slight southern drawl of someone who had lived his entire life in these parts. He wore faded blue jeans with patches carefully sewn onto the knees, patches his late mother had taught him to make when he was just a boy, and his gray flannel shirt had been washed so many times that the original pattern was barely visible. His work boots, though old, were clean. Marcus believed that a man's dignity wasn't measured by what he owned, but by how he carried himself. Victoria wiped her eyes quickly, embarrassed to be caught in such a vulnerable state by a stranger. She was used to being in control, used to commanding boardrooms and negotiating multi-million-dollar deals. But here, on this empty road with darkness falling fast, she felt utterly helpless. "I don't know what happened," she managed to say, her voice cracking. "I was driving, and suddenly the car just started pulling to the right. I've called for a tow truck, but they said it would be at least 3 hours. My phone is almost dead, and I..." She stopped, unable to continue as fresh tears threatened to spill. "3 hours is a long time to be out here alone," Marcus said, glancing around at the isolated stretch of highway. The nearest town was 15 miles away, and the sun was already dipping below the tree line. "Let me see what we're working with." He walked around to the passenger side of the car and immediately saw the problem: 2 tires, completely shredded. It was unusual for 2 tires to go flat simultaneously, but Marcus had seen stranger things in his years of helping stranded motorists. What he didn't see were the small puncture marks that had been carefully made hours earlier, designed to cause a slow leak that would eventually become catastrophic at exactly this location. "You've got 2 flats," Marcus reported, returning to the driver's window. "Your spare can only replace 1, so we're going to need to get creative. There's a service station about 3 miles up the road. It's closed now, but old Pete, he lives in the back. He owes me a favor. I can walk there, get another tire, and have you back on the road in a couple hours." Victoria stared at him in disbelief. "You would do that? Walk 3 miles in the dark for a complete stranger?" In her world, people didn't help each other without expecting something in return. Her entire career in corporate law had taught her that kindness was often just manipulation wearing a pleasant mask. Marcus smiled, and for a moment, the exhaustion and hardship that usually lined his face seemed to fade away. "My mama always said that the measure of a person isn't found in what they do when everyone's watching, but in what they do when no one is. Besides, I couldn't live with myself if I left you out here alone. It's supposed to drop below freezing tonight." He paused, then added, "There's a diner about a mile back. My buddy works there. Why don't you go wait inside where it's warm? Tell them Marcus sent you, they'll take care of you until I get back. Victoria felt something shift inside her chest, something she hadn't felt in years. This man, who clearly had nothing, was offering to walk 6 miles round trip in the freezing cold just to help her. At least let me give you money for the tire, she said, reaching for her purse. Marcus held up his hand. We'll figure that out later. Right now, let's just get you somewhere safe. He helped her retrieve her briefcase and phone charger from the car, then walked with her toward the diner, his worn boots crunching on the gravel shoulder of the road. Along the way, they talked. Victoria learned that Marcus had grown up in the area, that he had lost his mother to illness 5 years ago, and that he currently worked 3 jobs just to pay the rent on a small apartment above a hardware store. Marcus learned that Victoria was passing through on her way to close a major business deal in Nashville, that she worked for one of the largest law firms in the country, and that she hadn't spoken to her family in over 2 years. What neither of them shared were their deepest wounds, the ones they kept hidden from the world. Marcus didn't mention the wife who had left him 8 years ago, taking their unborn child with her because she couldn't face a life of poverty. Victoria didn't mention the engagement ring hidden in her glove compartment, the one she was supposed to have been wearing to meet her fiancé's parents this very evening, the engagement she had decided to call off just hours before her tires had mysteriously failed. Both of them were broken in ways that didn't show on the surface, carrying scars that time hadn't healed, only hidden. At the diner, a warm establishment called Ruby's Roadside, Marcus introduced Victoria to his friend Darnell, a cheerful man in his 50s who immediately offered her a booth by the window and a cup of hot coffee on the house. Any friend of Marcus is a friend of mine, Darnell said with a wink. That man has helped more people in this county than I can count. Never asks for anything in return, either. If there's one person in this world you can trust, it's Marcus Thompson. As Marcus headed out into the cold November night, Victoria watched him through the window until his figure disappeared into the darkness. Something about him stayed with her, the way he had looked at her not with judgment for her expensive clothes or pity for her tears, but with simple, genuine human compassion. In her 32 years, surrounded by wealth and power, she had rarely encountered anything so pure. 2 hours later, Marcus returned, another tire strapped to his back, his face red from the cold but his spirit unbroken. He worked on Victoria's car by the light of a flashlight Darnell had loaned him, his fingers growing numb as he removed the shredded tires and replaced them with the spare and the used tire old Pete had given him. Victoria had tried to wait with him, to at least offer her company, but Marcus had insisted she stay warm inside the diner. No sense in both of us freezing, he had said with that same gentle smile. When the job was finally done, Victoria came out to inspect his work. The used tire wasn't pretty, but it was functional, and Marcus had even taken the time to check her other tires and top off her windshield fluid from a bottle he carried in his backpack. This should get you to Nashville safely, he said, wiping his hands on a rag. Just make sure to get these properly checked when you get there. These tires. He paused, examining the shredded rubber in the dim light. It's strange. Looks almost like they were cut, not worn through. You should probably mention that to the mechanic. Victoria felt a chill that had nothing to do with the weather. Cut? Why would someone cut my tires? Marcus shook his head. I'm probably wrong. Could just be road debris. Either way, you're good to go now. He extended his hand for a simple handshake, but Victoria surprised him by pulling him into a hug. He stood there, stiff and uncertain at first, then slowly relaxed, his arms coming up to return the embrace. It had been years since anyone had hugged him. How can I ever repay you? Victoria asked when she finally pulled away, her green eyes glistening with gratitude. Just pay it forward, Marcus said. Help someone else when they need it. That's all the payment I'll ever need. He refused the money she tried to press into his hand, refused her offer to call him a cab, refused everything except the warmth in her eyes when she looked at him. As Victoria drove away, she glanced in her rearview mirror and saw Marcus standing in the same spot, watching her go, his figure growing smaller and smaller until the darkness swallowed him completely. She didn't know why, but she felt like crying again, not from distress this time, but from something else entirely, something that felt terrifyingly close to longing. That night, Marcus walked the 5 miles back to his apartment above the hardware store. His legs ached, his fingers were still numb, and he had given away the only extra money he had set aside for food that week. He had slipped $40 to old Pete for the tire when Victoria wasn't looking. But as he climbed the creaky stairs to his small, sparse home, he felt richer than he had in years. There was something about helping others that filled the emptiness inside him, something that all the money in the world couldn't buy. He fell asleep that night thinking about green eyes and auburn hair, about a woman who smelled like expensive perfume but looked at him like he was worth something. It was a foolish thought, he knew. Women like Victoria Sterling didn't belong in the world of men like Marcus Thompson. Their encounter had been a random intersection of two vastly different lives, nothing more. By morning, she would probably have forgotten he existed. But Marcus was wrong about that. Very wrong. Victoria did not forget about him. In fact, as she drove through the night toward Nashville, she couldn't stop thinking about him. There was something about Marcus Thompson that she couldn't shake, something that had nothing to do with his good deed and everything to do with the way he had made her feel, seen, valued, not for her money or her status, but simply for being a person in need. When she finally arrived at her hotel at 2 in the morning, she found herself unable to sleep. She lay awake, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of their conversation. The next morning, instead of preparing for her business meeting, Victoria found herself doing something completely out of character. She opened her laptop and began to research Marcus Thompson. It wasn't difficult. In small towns, everyone knew everyone. Within an hour, she had learned more about him than he had shared in their 2 hours together, and what she learned broke her heart. Marcus had been a promising young man once, a star athlete in high school with a full scholarship to college. But when his mother had gotten sick during his sophomore year, he had dropped out to take care of her. For 15 years, he had devoted his life to her care, working multiple jobs to pay her medical bills, never complaining, never asking for help. When she finally passed away, Marcus had been left with nothing, no degree, no savings, no future. The medical debt had consumed everything. But that wasn't the worst of it. Victoria also discovered that Marcus had been engaged once, to a woman named Lydia, and that Lydia had left him when she became pregnant, unable to face the prospect of raising a child in poverty. She had moved across the country, and Marcus had never seen his daughter, a daughter he probably didn't even know existed, because Lydia had told him she had lost the baby before she left. Victoria sat back from her laptop, her hand over her mouth. This man, this beautiful, kind, selfless man, had been through so much. And yet, instead of becoming bitter or hardened, he had chosen to spend his free time helping strangers on the side of the road. He had chosen kindness in a world that had shown him very little. She made a decision then, a decision that would change both their lives forever. But she never got the chance to act on it, not that day, anyway. Because later that afternoon, as Victoria was sitting in her hotel room gathering the courage to call the number for Marcus's hardware store, her phone rang with news that turned her blood to ice. It was Detective Sarah Collins from the Jameson County Sheriff's Office. Victoria Sterling was wanted for questioning in connection with a crime. They had found evidence at the scene that pointed directly to her. The detective's next words made Victoria's heart stop completely. "Ma'am, I regret to inform you that Marcus Thompson was found unresponsive in his apartment this morning. He was rushed to the hospital in critical condition. And your fingerprints were found on a bottle of antifreeze near his body. We're going to need you to return to Jameson County immediately." The world tilted beneath Victoria's feet. This couldn't be happening. She had only met Marcus for a few hours. She had hugged him, shaken his hand, nothing more. How could her fingerprints be on anything in his apartment? And antifreeze, that was a common method of poisoning, slow and insidious. Who would want to hurt someone as harmless and good as Marcus Thompson? But even as the detective continued speaking, giving her instructions for how to turn herself in, Victoria's mind was racing. Someone had set them up, both of them. The punctured tires that had brought them together. The random meeting on a deserted highway. And now Marcus was fighting for his life, and she was the prime suspect. Victoria didn't run. She didn't lawyer up and hide behind her firm's resources, though she could have. Instead, she did something that surprised even herself. She drove straight back to Jameson County, determined to clear her name and find out who was behind this nightmare. Because somewhere in that small hospital, Marcus Thompson was lying in a bed, possibly dying, and the last thing Victoria remembered was the warmth of his embrace and the kindness in his eyes. She wasn't going to let whoever did this get away with it. Not if she had anything to say about it. When she arrived at the sheriff's station, she was met by Detective Collins, a sharp-eyed woman in her 40s with graying hair and a no-nonsense attitude. "Ms. Sterling, thank you for coming in voluntarily. I have to say, most people with your resources would have sent a lawyer first." "I have nothing to hide," Victoria said firmly. "I met Marcus Thompson for the first time last night when he helped me with my car. He walked 6 miles in the freezing cold to get me a new tire. I hugged him when we said goodbye, that's it. I have no idea how my fingerprints ended up in his apartment, because I was never in his apartment." Detective Collins studied her for a long moment, then nodded slowly. "That's what I was hoping you'd say. Because here's the thing, Ms. Sterling, the more we look into this case, the stranger it gets. The bottle of antifreeze with your prints? It was planted. And the person who called in the anonymous tip about Marcus being sick? They used a voice disguiser, but we traced the call to a pay phone in Nashville, not far from your hotel." Victoria's blood ran cold. Someone is framing me. But why? I don't even know anyone in this town except Marcus and the people at the diner. That's what we're trying to figure out. We've ruled you out as a suspect, your alibi checks out, and frankly, the evidence was too convenient. Whoever did this wanted you to be blamed, but they made mistakes. What I need to know is, can you think of anyone who would want to hurt both you and Marcus Thompson? Victoria thought hard, but nothing made sense. She was a corporate lawyer, she had made enemies in the boardroom, sure, but no one who would go to such elaborate lengths. And Marcus? He was a man who helped strangers and worked at a hardware store. What enemies could he possibly have? It was then that Detective Collins revealed the second piece of information that would turn this mystery even more complex. "Ms. Sterling, there's something else. We found a photograph in Marcus's apartment, a photograph he seems to have been keeping hidden. It's of a woman and a child. The child is about 8 years old, and on the back of the photo is written a name, Eleanor." Victoria frowned. "Who's Eleanor? We were hoping you could tell us." "Because the woman in the photograph, Ms. Sterling, she looks exactly like you." Victoria's world spun again. "That's impossible. I've never had a child. I've never even been pregnant." But even as she said the words, a memory surfaced, a conversation with her mother, years ago, when Victoria had been going through some old family documents. Her mother had grown strangely quiet when Victoria had found a birth certificate with her name on it, dated 2 years before Victoria's own birthday. When Victoria had asked about it, her mother had quickly changed the subject and never mentioned it again. What if Victoria had a twin sister she never knew about? A sister who had somehow encountered Marcus Thompson, had a child with him, and then disappeared? It would explain why Marcus had seemed so comfortable with her from the very first moment, why he had looked at her with that strange mixture of recognition and confusion. He thought he knew her, because he had known someone who looked exactly like her. The investigation took an unexpected turn over the following days. Victoria, now cleared of suspicion but still deeply involved, worked alongside Detective Collins to unravel the mystery. They discovered that Marcus had, indeed, been in a relationship years ago with a woman named Evelyn, a woman who had left town suddenly and whom Marcus had never been able to find. And Evelyn, according to old photographs the detective was able to obtain, was Victoria's identical twin. Victoria confronted her parents over a strained phone call, and the truth finally came out. Yes, she had been a twin. Evelyn had been born first, but she had been given up for adoption due to complications. Victoria's parents had been young, poor, and could barely afford one child. They had always intended to find Evelyn when they were more stable, but by the time they had the resources to search, Evelyn had been lost in the foster system, her record sealed. Evelyn had grown up difficult, bounced between homes, and developed serious mental health issues that were never properly treated. She had eventually ended up in Jameson County, where she had met and fallen in love with a young man named Marcus Thompson. When she had become pregnant, her fragile mind had frack.